For me, the dark night of the soul means a realignment of focus on what truly matters. When there is enough discomfort, we slow down, allow things to fall away, and make room for future growth and a deeper union with God. I truly believe that, and so did a 16th century Spanish mystic who wrote those very words, the dark night of the soul, not from a comfortable monastery, but from a tiny dark prison cell where his own religious order had locked him away. His name was St. John of the Cross, and what he discovered in the darkness has guided, comforted, and transformed spiritual seekers for 500 years. Welcome to Ascend and Awaken, timeless wisdom for awakening and inner peace. St. John of the Cross was born in 1542 in Spain and stands as one of the most profound mystics and spiritual teachers in all of Christian history. A Carmelite friar, a poet, and a doctor of the Church, his writings on the soul's journey toward God have inspired countless seekers across 5 centuries. But before he became one of the great teachers of Christian mysticism, he became a prisoner. The Dark Night of the Soul was composed during his 9-month imprisonment in a Carmelite monastery in Toledo, Spain in 1577. His own religious brothers, threatened by his desire to reform the Carmelite order, locked him in a cell so small he could barely stand. He was kept in near darkness, given minimal food, and subjected to regular punishment. And it was there, in that literal dark night, that he received the mystical insights that would become one of the greatest works in all of Christian spirituality. The darkness that was meant to break him became the very doorway through which God arrived most fully. That is the teaching in a single sentence. Most people who have heard of the dark night of the soul think it means depression, or a crisis of faith, or God withdrawing his presence as some kind of punishment. St. John of the Cross says something completely different. The dark night of the soul describes a period of spiritual dryness and purification. It is not a state of despair, but a necessary stage in the mystical journey where the soul is stripped of its illusions and attachments, paving the way for a deeper union with God. It is a process of purification, not punishment. I'll say that again. Purification, not punishment. Not God withdrawing, God arriving, more deeply than the soul has ever allowed before. St. John emphasized that his dark night is not a punishment, but an act of divine mercy. God removes all false lights so that the soul may be guided solely by faith and love. That reframe, from punishment to mercy, changes everything about how we experience our darkest seasons. St. John describes the dark night in 2 distinct stages, and understanding both helps make sense of what you may have already lived through without knowing it had a name. The first is the night of the senses, in which the soul detaches from material and emotional pleasures. The second is the night of the spirit, a deeper purification that affects intellect, memory, and will. The night of the senses is the more familiar one. The things you used to find comfort in no longer comfort you. The distractions that used to work stop working. The busyness, the noise, the numbing, all of it becomes unsatisfying. And in that dissatisfaction, something is being cleared. The night of the spirit goes deeper. This is the season where even prayer feels dry, where the spiritual consolations that once came easily seem to have disappeared entirely, where you cannot feel God no matter how sincerely you seek. And St. John says, this is not failure. This is the most advanced stage of the journey. Because no matter how much individuals do through their own efforts, they cannot purify themselves enough for divine union. God must take over. The dark night is God taking over. Here's what makes St. John's teaching so startling and so aligned with everything the other great mystics have pointed toward. The dark night is not primarily about what you lose. It is about what finds you when the losing is complete. Life's challenges and tribulations are necessary to purify the soul of attachments, desires, and imperfections. And when the soul is freed from these cages and anchors, it can finally rise and reunite with God. You stop seeking quite so desperately, because you begin to realize you are being sought. This is the bridge St. John is pointing to. The dark night is where the seeker finally becomes still enough to be found, where the striving quiets enough for love to arrive, where everything you thought you needed falls away. and what remains is the only thing that was ever real. The dark night is a certain inflowing of God into the soul, whereby God teaches the soul and instructs it in the perfection of love, secretly, quietly, in the darkness. While you thought nothing was happening, everything was happening. If you are in a dark season right now, if things have fallen away that you thought were permanent, if you feel spiritually dry and cannot find the consolation that used to come, St. John of the Cross has something specific to say to you. He says, "In tribulation, immediately draw near to God with confidence, and you will receive strength, enlightenment, and instruction, not away from God, toward God, even when, especially when, God feels absent." He also says, "Patience gains all. Nothing is lacking to those who have God. God alone is sufficient." The dark night is not the end of the spiritual journey. It is the deepest part of it. In the final stage, what St. John calls the spiritual marriage, is where the soul and God are joined in a bond of perfect love and mutual indwelling, a mystical union beyond words, where the self ceases to seek and simply is in God. This is where the dark night leads, not to more darkness, to the most complete light available to a human soul. Thank you for spending this time with me here on Ascend and Awaken. Today's invitation is this. If you are in a dark season, or if you have been through one and are only now beginning to understand what it was, sit with one question. What fell away in the darkness that needed to fall away? And what remains that could not be taken? That which remains, St. John of the Cross would say, is the realest thing about you. Share in the comments. Have you ever experienced a dark night that later revealed itself as something other than what you thought it was? I would genuinely love to hear your story. If Ascend and Awaken supports your journey, consider subscribing for more reflections on timeless wisdom, spiritual awakening, and inner peace. Until next time, peace, love, and light to you on your spiritual journey.